everyone hear me okay? I'm Carly, and I'm going to read to you some things that I wrote about what's been going on in my life and what I think about all of it. First, I want to start by saying that I feel like a fraud. I'm compelled to share this so that if you see me shaking like a leaf, which you might, you'll see me visibly nervous, adrenaline zinging through my body, preparing me to run from the crowd of bears. That's all of you in this scenario. You don't think to yourself, wow, that girl is not at home in this situation. I have to lay this all out there so you know the visible signs of fear come from a place of vulnerability. Intellectually, I don't feel scared to get up and speak to a crowd, but my sympathetic nervous system never passes up an opportunity to slip into fight or flight. I'm 2 generations removed from family members who needed some of that quality adrenaline to escape harrowing conditions in Germany. But as you likely know, that kind of trauma changes your genes and then gets passed down to future generations who pump themselves full of SSRIs, and we try and heal our guts in an attempt to override our genetic mutations so we can just live in peace. I'm going to try and remind myself that you are not enemies trying to erase my existence or a crowd of bears, but instead very docile library goers who believe that me, a former dance major, you can all gasp, has something worthwhile to say. And I also want to give you permission to laugh or cry. It's all welcome here. So you wouldn't think I would get so worked up in front of people. I spent much of my youth on stage, but I was always dancing, never speaking. And with dancing, the adrenaline wears off almost immediately. It's really interesting. It just, as you start to move, you know, it exits your body through carriages of the arms, which we call port de bras, and centuries-old codified French steps. So to be up in front of you all in a speaking capacity, well, this is new for me. However, there's some overlap between my performance experience as a child and the topic of today's event. You see, for 11 winters of my youth, I cosplayed as characters in a popular German fairy tale, The Nutcracker. You heard of it? I first caught the Nutcracker bug after seeing a production at age 6 with my grandparents in Pennsylvania. The next year, I joined a local production and proceeded to rise through the ranks, all while coveting the role of the story's protagonist, Clara Stahlbaum. Clara is a young German girl who receives a special gift on Christmas Eve, a nutcracker from Nuremberg. When I was 13, my dreams came true and I was cast as Clara. I did pause for a brief moment of uncharacteristic teenage insight to recognize the irony of playing the Christmas-loving Clara, as I happened to be named after my father's Aunt Clara, who escaped Nazi persecution in Germany in 1934. I loved everything about pretending to be Clara, especially being the star of a formal European Christmas party, something that felt so familiar, yet a land of sweets away from my actual life. My German Holocaust survivor grandparents dutifully sat through all of my Nutcracker performances, and lately I've been wondering if their minds went where mine's been going these days. I can't shake the question, somewhat ironically, sarcastically, if we revisited the Stahlbaum family a few decades after the Nutcracker takes place, would they have been Nazis? The deeper I get into my genealogy, the harder it is not to view things through that lens. I'm really fun at dinner parties. I'm not going to count on the Nutcracker Part 2, Were They Nazis, getting produced, but I do wonder. And now I apologize for ruining the Nutcracker for all of you, and enjoy this holiday season. Anyway, my performance credentials to this point have been exclusively dance-related, mostly pretending to be characters in a house full of potential Nazis. So I suppose the other option for me to express what I have to say in a way that feels more familiar, less fraudulent, would be through interpretive dance. Though a friend once proudly boasted that he did an interpretive dance for his bar mitzvah and God loved it, I will spare you that secondhand embarrassment and stick to the script. I'm here because my grandfather escaped Germany in 1936, a country I can now legally call home. He was born in a small town in Bavaria called Bergsen. And I think if you asked AI to produce a photo of a stereotypical German town, the bot would just source photos from Bergsen. At least that's the feeling I get after my hours on the internet. I've never been. I'm a newly official German citizen, and the only German house I've been in is the fictional home of the Stahlbaums. Fraud, or at least that's how it feels sometimes. Despite my years of German role play, I never had a strong desire to visit the country, probably because my grandparents, like many German immigrants, renounced anything German and strictly forbade me from ever purchasing anything German, especially a German car. And I'm proud to say I've never purchased a German car, but something tells me that becoming a citizen of the country that persecuted your family might be a little worse than the car thing in their eyes. Needless to say, the decision to pursue naturalization was a bit unexpected for me. One that was catalyzed by another tragedy, which was the death of my father, who was my last strong connection to my German heritage. I don't want to paint an inaccurate picture. My dad's German identity was perhaps more like background noise than top of mind. It's hard to escape your German identity when your last name is Hamburger, but it was easy to bury when it was convenient. Like many things in life, I didn't know I'd miss that background noise until it was gone. I like to call the phenomenon of mourning the death of a parent through pursuing German citizenship the 6th stage of grief. It really hit me when I realized that my father would never sing a German nursery rhyme that was a staple of my childhood. Huppa Huppa Rider, I don't know if any of you know it, or Hop Hop Rider in English. It's a German lap rhyme dating back to the 1800s, where an adult bounces a child on their lap, like the kid is riding a horse, and the rider encounters several harrowing incidents and then tips the child back when they fall into the mud and they make a splash. And it really leans hard into being a stereotypical German nursery rhyme because it has some classic lines like, if he falls into the hedges, he will get frightened. And if he falls on the stone, his leg will get hurt. But perhaps my favorite is, if he falls into the ditch, he will be eaten by ravens. So Hubba Hubba Rider is one of my strongest connections to the immersive German culture of my grandfather's youth, which was a short, blissful time in Bavaria before the Nazis exiled his family and murdered his younger brother, which was my father's namesake. I imagine my great-great-grandfather singing Hoppa Hoppa Rider to my grandfather and his siblings, and I feel a little more connected to a life I never knew and people I never met. And it's a life I'd like to reclaim in any way possible. Assembling the documentation for the German naturalization application feels like homework from your most annoying therapist. You're required to dredge up all the details your family has tried to bury for decades, and you can't help but process them as they transform from family secrets to necessary evidence right before your eyes. During my research, I discovered a 2008 German newspaper article about Kristallnacht that pulled a quote from my great-grandfather's letter that was used as testimony at the Nuremberg trials. Of Kristallnacht, my great-grandfather wrote, "When night fell, my house was completely empty. Everything was lost. Only what we had on our body was our own." And he also describes having to drive his car out of the garage, which was very unusual to have, in kind of a rural town in Bavaria. You have to be very wealthy, and sell it at a very cheap price to a Nazi. Through the gathering of birth and death dates that's necessary for the application, I happened to realize that the night he lost his home was also his 50th birthday. About 18 months after I submitted my naturalization paperwork, I received an email that my certificate was waiting for me at the German consulate in Atlanta. The employees at the consulate were nothing short of lovely, but the appointment was one of the weirdest experiences of my entire life. Firstly, I had to present my papers before I was allowed to even enter. Intellectually, I knew this was to weed out the people that show up missing important things to get their passports, but it was very unsettling. Then my husband and I went to a small conference room where a kind employee, it was his first day, signed my paperwork, shook my hand, and said, "As of this moment, you are a German citizen." He then presented me with a German consulate swag bag. It had a lanyard and a water bottle and this pin that I'm wearing. And I'm not one to turn up my nose at free swag, but we weren't even 10 steps out of the conference room before I was workshopping my joke, "The Nazis killed my family and all I got was a stupid tote bag." I wasn't sure if that one was gonna land. People cope in different ways. After the tote bag service, I had my passport appointment and the process was complete. For all of 5 minutes, I had a little bit of a pep in my step, swinging my tote bag and generally feeling pretty positive about the entire experience. And then I walked past a car in the garage with a license plate that stopped me in my tracks. It proudly displayed Aryan R. So that's what's been wild about this experience. One moment I can feel hopeful and excited to reconnect with a part of my heritage, and the next I feel myself bristling at the sound of the German language. I can feel a moment of peace knowing I reclaimed something that was stolen from my family over 80 years ago. And then the next moment, someone suggests I might use my citizenship to escape growing anti-Semitism in the United States. One moment, I can be watching my 8-year-old daughter follow in my literal footsteps as she rehearses this fall for her role as party girl at the Stahlbaum's Christmas party. And the next, I wonder if the hot tears that seem to come with Tchaikovsky's score are a result of nostalgia or the shattering of innocence. One moment, I feel a sense of belonging when I think about Germany. And the next, I feel like a total fraud since I'm now a German who has never been to Germany, doesn't know the language, aside from how to say he will be eaten by ravens. I will never reclaim my family's physical possessions that were destroyed on Kristallnacht, or my grandfather's childhood home, which was most recently a hair salon, or my great-grandfather's store, which now operates as a gym, or the lives of countless relatives. However, when the kind man at the consulate shook my hand, and told me I was officially a German citizen, I felt a rush of sweet emotion and a desire just to let it be. There doesn't have to be a to-do list of ways I'm going to use this new power. The fact that it exists is probably more than any of my ancestors could have ever imagined. I'm hoping one day soon I will make a trip to Germany, where I imagine tracking down an equestrian and discussing in German all the ways he can fall off his horse and hurt himself. Or befriending a wealthy couple and getting an invitation to a magical Christmas party. And they'll look at me and see that I have the official tote bag of the German people, and the face of someone who's danced in the Nutcracker far too many times, and say, Willkommen zu Haus. Oh.